Dear listeners, before we start the show today, we have a quick announcement to make. For those of you who are regular listeners of the podcast, you would know that we have been working on a show about love and relationships. And we have been working on this show in collaboration with the German broadcaster DW. The good news is that the show finally comes out this October, and it will be hosted by the Bollywood actor Evelyn Sharma. In the meantime, though, we are still working on it. And in one of our episodes, we will be talking about divorce, which unfortunately continues to have a stigma associated with it. So if you're someone who has recently been divorced or are going through it right now or are even thinking about it, we want to hear from you. We want to know what this time has been like for you and how you've been dealing with the challenges that come with it. Please write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com. That's PODCASTS at indianexpress.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Now, on with the show. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the controversy around the suicide of a 22-year-old. We also take a quick look at the latest development in the Assam-Mizoram border tensions. But first, we talk about the Indian shuttler PV Sindhu. On Sunday, Sindhu made history when she won a bronze medal in the women's single at the Tokyo Olympics. With this win, she became only the second Indian athlete after Sushil Kumar to win 2 individual Olympic medals. And her bronze medal was also India's 3rd medal in the Olympics this time, after the silver medal won by weightlifter Saikom Mirabai Chanu and the bronze medal that is assured for boxer Lovlina Borgohain. Now, Sindhu is one of the best shuttlers in the world, and she has proved that time and again. And although this time she was hoping for a gold medal, she didn't win one. So what challenges came in the way of achieving that target? And how did her performance compare with the last Olympics? And what are the things that make Sindhu stand out as a shuttler? In this segment, Shivani Nayak, who writes on badminton for the Indian Express, joins us to talk about it. Shivani, Sindhu won the silver medal in the last Olympics in Rio. That time she was competing with the Spanish shuttler Carolina Marin. So going into this Olympics, she obviously must have had gold as her target. So how confident was she going in, and what challenges were we expecting this time?
So, Sindhu has won the bronze at Tokyo, which makes her the first woman athlete from India to win back-to-back medals. So I think that's great on its own. She obviously won silver at Rio, which means this is a bit of a step down from 5 years ago. But just considering the field that came to Tokyo, I'm sure Sindhu fancied her chances of getting the title, of getting gold. She was as good as probably 3-4 others in that top bracket. She had prepared really well. She was very comfortable with the coach. She had enough time to work on her game. So if you actually watch Sindhu at Tokyo compared to what she was at Rio, the game is certainly evolved. She's a much more rounded player. But of course, just the way she had kind of gleaned weaknesses and the games of other opponents, they had read her too. And that probably played a part in the semi-finals when she lost to Tai Tzu Ying.
Yeah, and this match with Tai Tzu Ying was the only match she lost, and Tai Tzu Ying, of course, went on to win the silver medal. So what kind of challenges did she face in this particular match with her?
So, at the outset, I should say that I thought this was a tough draw for her. One, because in the quarters, she was supposed to play Yamaguchi, who was a local contender. She outplayed her completely in the quarters, but Tai Tzu Ying has always been an extremely difficult opponent. Sindhu beat her pretty easy at Rio in straight sets when she completely bombarded her with her attack, and she left her dazed. But subsequently, whether it's the last World Championships where she also beat Tai Tzu Ying, but that was in 3 sets. And that had been an extremely tactical match. So it was going to be difficult. She was in good form coming out of the quarters against Yamaguchi, but Tai Tzu Ying was always going to be tough. I would say that I initially thought that her earlier rounds would be tough, but Sindhu didn't drop a game at all till losing to Tai Tzu. So she had a good passage into the semis, but yeah, that hurdle was too high for her to cross.
Okay, so then the next match was, of course, the bronze medal event where she won. And to an amateur viewer watching the game, it felt like Sindhu was pretty much dominating through and through. I mean, she won the first two sets, and her opponent, He Bingjiao, definitely seemed like the weaker player in front of her. But what did you make of the match?
So just the way He Bingjiao had beaten Nozomi Okuhara, who was the second Japanese in the field, I thought that she was playing really well. She's the second Chinese in terms of rankings. She's a left-hander who has a very, very technically strong game. But against Sindhu, she literally stood no chance. Sindhu took apart her backhand. That's where she scored her win. And she was in phenomenal touch on that day. She was obviously extremely motivated to make up for that lost semi-final. And it was a commanding display against the Chinese, who it was said have come into Tokyo with amazing preparation. They hadn't played since March 2020. They were in camps. They had simulated the conditions. They had a grip on the shuttle. Now, you have to understand this, that usually Japanese courts, this particular stadium plays very slow. So there are slow shuttles usually on the circuit events. But I think there was a googly thrown into this Olympics, and they used extremely fast shuttles, which was one of the reasons why Tai Tzu had an advantage over Sindhu. But against He Bingjiao, Sindhu just slayed a completely seamless, perfect game.
So you mentioned that her performance has really evolved since the last Olympics in Rio. But what do you think really kept her from winning that elusive gold medal this time?
I mean, Tai Tzu stopped her this time. But looking at the final, I think even Chen Yufei would have been a very tough opponent. So the gold was going to be a hard-earned one. It was difficult to say if she played somebody else other than Tai Tzu, if she would have kind of advanced to the finals. But that was a crucial match. And tactically, she wasn't there in that particular game. And that proved costly, and it got her to step down from the higher step of the podium.
You know, the other thing that was talked about a lot while going into these games was that the national head coach Gopi Chand, he wasn't going to be with Sindhu, and instead Park Tae-sun, this other South Korean coach, was going to accompany Sindhu. And people were wondering how much difference would that make. So now with Sindhu having won the bronze, how much do we assess that actually made a difference, if at all?
Sindhu has become a far bigger athlete than to be bothered by whether it's this coach or that coach, when both coaches are pretty good. They both are at a very good level. They both have helped her game at different stages of her career, but she needed that personalized attention, or she wanted that personalized attention, which she got from Coach Park. And he helped plug a few gaps in her game. There were problems with the defense. He sharpened it, for sure. She looked a much more confident player at the net, which was something that he had worked on. Tactically, against Tai Tzu, maybe a combination of Park and Gopi Chand might have helped. But again, it's a hypothetical scenario. It could have gone either ways. But it always helps to have two good coaches think for you. And that would have been ideal. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is Sindhu who has to go out there and play, whether it was Rio or in Tokyo, whether it was against Maran or Tai Tzu, or whether it was the Asian Games where Gopi was sitting for her match against Tai Tzu and she still lost. Or, the World Championships in 2019 where he was sitting for her match and she did win, along with, there was the other Korean coach as well. So there have been all sorts of scenarios, and we'll never know. But yeah, it was something that could have been explored.
Okay, and not to expect too much from one athlete, but can Sindhu hope to win a gold medal at the next Olympics? Is that possible, considering her trajectory and even considering her age, maybe?
Okay, so it'll be slightly disrespectful to not expect something from Sindhu. I think that'll be the worst scenario for her, because she has been so consistent in winning at the absolute top level. There are 5 World Championship medals, there are 2 Olympic medals now. even at Tokyo, I would say the bronze was a distinct disappointment. Sindhu was primed for gold, and that is what it should have been. But now, 3 years from now in Paris, I think it's going to be difficult because the body takes a beating after all these years of playing. But knowing Sindhu, she does target the majors. She has a world championship later in the year. It's a title that she will look to defend. No Indian woman has won the All England. It's a box that she wants to tick. And just looking at the last few years, if that is how she plans, and she's stated her intent to be in Paris, and Sindhu doesn't land up somewhere to not win. So, yeah, I mean, gold, too early to say, far too early to say, but Sindhu's always a contender.
And Shivani, for those people who may not have watched Sindhu play so intently, what do you think makes her stand out from other shuttlers?
So I think her top quality, and this is a global thing, okay, this is not just about being like the best Indian, is that she is extremely dependable at the big stage. So basically what happens is we have a lot of athletes who do well once and then it's difficult to repeat that performance. But Sindhu just turns up at like one major after another, and she's just at it. She's completely focused on the medal. She's a brilliant athlete for a country to have at these multi-sport games where definitely she'll assure you the medal. And this time it was challenging because she lost that final and it would have been very... not that it would have been excusable, but people wouldn't really fault her if things just went downhill from there and she did not win that bronze playoff. But Sindhu never gives up, and she decided medal on offer is the bronze and she will go for it, and she got it. And she took apart the Chinese who had prepared very well mentally. The bronze that was won was extremely hard earned, and that is what Sindhu brings to a table. She gets the job done.
And next we talk about the controversy around Pooja Chavan's death. Back in February, a 22-year-old named Pooja Chavan had died by suicide. And her death had become a reason for a political fight in Maharashtra. This is because a number of allegations were made by those in the opposition that her death had something to do with the former Maharashtra minister Sanjay Rathod. Though this was back in February. Now, during the investigation into the matter, the Pune police seems to have found recordings of calls that supposedly happened between Pooja and Sanjay Rathod. In this segment, Mohammad Thawar, who has been reporting on this story, joins us to talk about it. Mohammad, could you first talk about who Pooja Chavan was?
Yeah, so Pooja Chavan was this influential TikToker. Basically, she hailed from Bid in rural Maharashtra. So she wanted to get into modeling, but then eventually she took to social media and her TikTok posts were really popular, especially among youngsters in Bid, where she hailed from, and also the Banjara community, which is a nomadic community. So over a period of time, she had a lot of followers and she was well known within the community. And in fact, she also had Pankaja Munde, a BJP leader, she was known to her. So, I mean, yeah, she was quite popular that way.
And what do we know about how she died?
Yeah, so basically on February 7th, early morning, while she was from Bid, but she was staying in Pune, saying that she was doing an educational course there. So she was staying in Mohammadwadi area of Pune along with two other roommates. So in the morning, it is believed that she jumped from her house, where the place that she was staying on rent, and committed suicide. And the police initially took an accidental death report in the case. There was no suicide note as such found. And they questioned two people staying with her. And then the case remained at that. Like there was an ADR registered, and that's where the case stands till date.
Okay, so we have this 22-year-old who dies by suicide. She doesn't leave a note. And you mentioned, of course, that she was popular on TikTok. But why did her death start making headlines? Why did it become controversial?
Yeah, so what happened is within the next few days, like 5 days after her death, the former CM and leader of opposition, Devendra Fadnavis, he wrote to the Maharashtra DGP saying that there was more to the suicide and there were some powerful people involved. He said that the Pune police that was investigating the case was investigating it superficially. And he also attached 12 audio files to the digital letter that he sent. Now, the allegation that Fadnavis and other BJP leaders, especially Chitra Wagh, who was very vocal, was against the then Maharashtra Forest Minister Sanjay Rathod, who is from the Shiv Sena. The allegation was that there was some sort of a relationship between Sanjay Rathod and Pooja Chavan. There were photographs of them that were circulated on social media. There were also these 12 audio clips that were given by Fadnavis to the DGP. So in these audio clips, there were two people. One was claimed to be Sanjay Rathod, and the other, this guy called Arun Rathod, who is believed to be Sanjay Rathod's aide, who worked for Sanjay Rathod and resided with Pooja Chavan. So what the opposition said was that Sanjay Rathod was in a relationship with Pooja Chavan, and he had kept two of his aides to stay with her at Pune and look after if she needed anything.
And these recorded conversations that are supposed to be between Sanjay Rathod and Arun Rathod, his aide, what are they about?
Yeah, so in these conversations, you can hear them discuss things like Pooja Chavan is talking about committing suicide, and this one guy is telling the other guy, who the BJP claims is Sanjay Rathod, that please tell her not to commit suicide. And she is so popular, and girls look up to her. And if she does such a thing, it's not a good thing to happen. And then in one conversation, she is saying that she is ready to do the treatment, but after that, she will commit suicide. The BJP alleged that by treatment they meant abortion, although in the conversations speak about treatments. These clips went viral. The photo of Rathod with the girl went viral. So there were allegations that Sanjay Rathod was in a relationship with her. Maybe they alleged that he pushed her to get an abortion done, and hence the girl committed suicide. And they demanded that an FIR be registered against Sanjay Rathod on charges of abetment to suicide. Eventually, there was so much pressure that later that month, on the 28th of February, Sanjay Rathod stepped down as Forest Minister of Maharashtra.
Okay, so you have allegations that the former minister Sanjay Rathod and Pooja Chavan might have been in a relationship and he might have pushed her to get an abortion. And you also have these 12 audio clips that Devendra Fadnavis provided to the DGP where supposedly Sanjay Rathod and his aide Arun Rathod are talking. So what happens after that? Why is the case in the news again?
So the reason that the story is back in the news is that the Pune police during their investigation had sent Pooja Chavan's mobile phone to the forensic laboratory, and they had also found the CCTV footage at the Yavatmal Medical College Hospital. So Pooja Chavan died on Feb 7th. On Feb 6th, they found the footage in which a girl who appears like her and Arun Rathod are seen entering the hospital, and this is being captured in the CCTV footage. So the police also sent the CCTV footage to the forensic laboratory to check whether the footage is genuine. So recently we learned that the police, while going through the mobile phone of Pooja Chavan, found that in the days preceding her death, had several conversations with a person believed to be Sanjay Rathod. In fact, there was one conversation that lasted as much as 90 minutes. Now, these conversations took place in the local Banjara language, the community from which both Pooja Chavan and Sanjay Rathod hail. So these clips were then passed on to the Pune police. Also, the fact that the CCTV footage was genuine was informed to the Pune police. Now, this coupled with the fact that on the day that they have a footage of Pooja Chavan and the other guy entering, I mean, the people who look like them entering the hospital, in the hospital records, there is the record of a girl called Pooja Arun Rathod who underwent an abortion. So, what the opposition has alleged that this Pooja Arun Rathod is no one else but Pooja Chavan. She's used the name of Arun Rathod because he had accompanied her. This is what the BJP has alleged. So all these things coupled together was indicating that there may be some merit in the allegations of the opposition. So now that these clips have been sent by the forensic laboratory to the Pune police, will in a sense put pressure on the Pune police to probe the case because it is turning out to be a very sensitive case. Maybe even register an FIR in the case because that is what the demand has been from day one, that there is enough evidence that the girl has been pushed to commit suicide and at least an FIR should be registered. So with this latest development, there may be more pressure on the police.
Right, and in the middle of all this, there has been an allegation that has been made against the Pune police as well. Could you talk about what that has been?
So the one allegation that the Pune police too has faced is that of the audio clips that had started circulating earlier and even the audio clips that they have now recovered from Pooja Chavan's phone, the allegation is that the Pune police has not sought Sanjay Rathod's voice samples to check with the audio recordings to prove or disprove whether the person is Sanjay Rathod or not. which ideally would have aided their investigation. Sources told me that the audio clips have not been sent. When I asked the cops, they told me that we cannot speak about it at this stage and all the necessary things have been done. So, in a sense, apart from Sanjay Rathod, even the Pune police is under the spotlight because there are certain things that generally are followed in the line of investigation. In some cases, which has not been done in this case. So, with the latest evidence coming in, it will also put the Pune police in the spotlight and they do the next course of action that will be watched very closely.
Okay, so one thing to note is that the Pune police still doesn't know what exactly is being said in those recorded conversations that supposedly took place between Sanjay Rathod and Pooja Chavan. They are yet to get that translated. But even if they get that translated, I was wondering how hard is it to convict or even arrest someone in a case of abetment to suicide based on what they have said?
So, abetment to suicide is one of the most difficult charges to prove because in that there have been multiple court judgments that say that for a person to be convicted of abetment to suicide, one has to conclusively prove that the person gave the other person, the deceased, no option but to commit suicide. So, it's a very difficult charge to prove. But in this case, I believe the allegation that has been there from day one is that you at least register an FIR in the case. It's quite possible that the police may investigate the case and they may find that the voice belongs to Sanjay Rathod, but they may not find enough evidence to show that he was responsible for her suicide, which is very likely. But I think the issue at the center of this is that the fact that under normal circumstances, generally the police may have at least registered an FIR, called the person for questioning, which has not been done. So I believe that has been a big grouse for even the opposition, that you have not even registered an FIR, you have not even taken the statement. Like after you investigate the case and you tell them that we have not found enough evidence, I believe a lot of people would buy that. But the fact that there have been allegations that this has been a superficial probe and that like you have not even done all that is required to do before taking a decision, I think that has been a ground. The opposition has alleged that they believe that there is this superficial nature of the probe where you're not doing what needs to be done and things like that. So I believe that is at the center of a lot of heartburn for people who believe that the leader may have had something to do with Pooja Chavan's suicide.
And in the end, we talk about the Assam-Mizo border dispute. Yesterday, the border tensions between Assam and Mizoram appeared to de-escalate after Mizoram Chief Minister Zoramthanga said that he has directed the police to withdraw the FIR that was registered against Assam officials in connection with the July 26 clashes. During these clashes, 6 Assam police personnel and 1 civilian had died, while several others were left injured. Chief Minister Zoramthanga said that the decision to withdraw the FIR was taken in order to build a conducive atmosphere for amicable solution. Based on a report by Indian Express's Tora Agarwala, this step comes a day after both the chief ministers sought to dial down the tensions at the border after talks with Union Home Minister Amit Shah. On Sunday, Mizoram government had said that it was dropping the name of Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma from the FIR registered on July 26. Following which, Sarma announced that he had directed the police to withdraw the case against K. Venalvena, the Rajya Sabha MP from Mizoram, who had been booked in connection with the media interview that he had given. Tora Agarwala writes that since the border clashes last Monday, there had been an impasse with both states stationing their forces at the border along with the CAPF. Neither state was ready to back down. Both states had filed charges against each other in respective police stations in connection with the violence. As of Monday, while Mizoram has dropped all charges, the Assam government's case against 6 police officials from Mizoram still remains. You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.